Hi, everyone. Mitch from PickDogs.com. We got Ron Romanelli here with our College Football Week 2 show and special guest Jay Briggs standing in for Chris Ruffalo, who is booking his flight the same time that we normally shoot the show. Of course, you can hear Chris's opinions on the live show as well as our regular YouTube videos. But, guys, we're through week 1 of the season. Of course, week 0 came and went. But the thing is that, we've learned a lot about some teams. Some teams we haven't learned all that much, and what we've learned in the past is that, well, week 1 doesn't usually tell the whole story for the whole season. Even the first month doesn't tell the story for the whole season. But Ron, anything that you picked up on there that you think is just stone cold, good to go for the rest of the way for us?
Not really, but we saw some blowouts. We saw some closer games that we expected. That one Oregon Idaho game, a little too close for comfort for the Ducks, I bet. But I think week 2 we could see completely different things from these teams. Week 1, like you said, doesn't dictate the rest of the season. Florida State, though, back-to-back poor performances, not what you want to see to start your year.
How about you, Jay?
Hey, I'm excited for week 2. Glad to be here, talking some college football. I thought we saw a lot of stuff that will carry over into next week. Some of these high-profile teams may not be as good as advertised, and maybe some of these smaller teams might be trying to make a run this season in some of their conferences. So that's kind of where my interest is in some of the smaller schools that are going on a run. I'm excited to break it down and talk through it with you guys.
Well, we'll get a chance to talk about a lot of these teams today. So let's just get started. We get week 2 started with a big one. We head to the Big House in Michigan, where the Michigan Wolverines, the defending national champions, take on another participant in the CFP playoff last year, the Texas Longhorns, who did look impressive in week 1 against Colorado State, but we could say maybe not a great Colorado State team this year either. Boy, it was fun seeing Arch Manning out on the field. Ron, what do you think of this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's not too often you're going to see the defending national champs as a pretty sizable home underdog in just week 2 of the season. But it goes to show you, this Michigan team, I think the biggest question mark for me going into the year and for a lot of people was the quarterback play. And really, we didn't see a lot of those questions answered with that performance against Fresno State, just 120 passing yards collectively for Michigan. It wasn't the best performance. The defense was fine. The offensive line play was good. But Texas, I mean, absolute blowout in that week 1 game. And yes, it was Colorado State, but they've got some nice players in that team, including the quarterback, Fowler Nicolosi, one of the best receivers in the group of 5 as well, and Horton. So I think Texas' performance super impressive. I like their chances in this game, and this line is on the move now. I see it above 7.5 points now. I got to roll with the Longhorns laying the points.
For me, I just think that it's imperative that Michigan gets Edwards rolling in the running game. If they don't, it could be a very, very long day. But I think, the way that this one shapes up as that early TV game, as that game between two big teams like this, just seems like a pretty hefty number to be laying to the home team. Maybe the books are begging you to take Michigan here. They're not going to have to beg me all that much. You see a fairly low total for this game and a big number that Michigan is getting. Not a game that I love because I tell you, Steve Sarkisian never been a guy that I've been absolutely in love with as a head coach. So the bigger the game, the less I like him. I'm going to go with the Wolverines and just take the number at home.
Hey, fair enough, fair enough. Everybody knows this is my team. Hook 'em horns. Look, Michigan, I think the line tells you everything you need to know. I'm not as high on this team as I was last year. They lost a ton of production to the NFL, lost their head coach. Week 1, they did look really good. I'll give them credit for that. But Texas, man, watch out, bro. I think this team is arguably the best team in the nation. I think they're definitely in the running. They'll definitely be in the running for that come later on this season. I think their offense is going to be too high-powered for Michigan when this one is all said and done. I got Texas winning this game by 10. I think they win it by 10. Not my favorite game this week, but especially laying this many points on the road, but I do think they get it done in the end. I'm going to lay the points here with Texas in the Big House.
For the next game, we head to Stillwater, Oklahoma, where the Oklahoma State Cowboys made a statement in week 1 against South Dakota State, but Arkansas making a statement of their own, but it was Arkansas Pine Bluff. I'd have to say, I think Oklahoma State's statement against South Dakota State, certainly more of a statement, certainly a more highly regarded of the FCS teams and a team that we've seen on top of it. I thought it was super impressive the way they just dominated that game from start to finish. And while, Mike Gundy's teams have stumbled early in the season, boy, there was no signs of stumbling in that game. Meanwhile, for Arkansas, this is a team that continues to disappoint year after year. And while we see the hook added to this game to make it 7.5, at least at the time of shooting of this, trying to really entice those Hogs backers, I just don't see it. And I think, for Arkansas, I know this program, we've seen them take strides forward. They are a very proud and historic program, but at the same time, I got to see it to believe it, because when that crowd gets hyped up at Stillwater, it can be a super tough building. I'm going to roll with the Cowboys in this one in a game, probably not rush into the window.
Yeah, Stillwater is definitely a tough place to go and play. I understand that. And Oklahoma State did look good last week, in my opinion, beating up on South Dakota State. We know how good South Dakota State is in FCS play. Thing here is I like what I saw from that Arkansas offense last week, too. I will say, Oklahoma State is the better football team, but do I want to lay a touchdown and the hook? I don't think so. I think Taylor Green and this Arkansas offense can do enough, score enough points to make this game interesting. I'm going to grab the points here with Arkansas. I'm going to fade Oklahoma State and Stillwater.
Yeah, I thought Oklahoma State's performance was solid. I don't think it was as dominant as others may think. When South Dakota State, they moved the ball pretty well in that game, and they only punted the ball 3 times. They were 0 of 17 on 3rd and 4th down, and you're never going to win a game, especially on the road against a team like Oklahoma State, if you put that together. But Oklahoma State conceded 388 total yards in that game. I think Arkansas's offense has improved, even despite losing KJ Jefferson this offseason. I think Arkansas is going to be able to move the ball in this game. I expect a higher scoring one, but I think Arkansas covers the number, especially catching more than a touchdown.
For our next game, we head to what should be a good one, as we got a group of 5, I'd say, candidate to make the playoff type team in Tulane, hosting Kansas State. A lot of people have pegged to win the Big 12 conference, especially with Oklahoma and Texas vacating the premises. I think this is going to be a pretty good one. And we see a pretty big number on this one. I don't know if the books are, baiting us to take the dog here, or if they really see a dominating performance by K-State, led by a quarterback who can simply do it all. Ron?
Yeah, I'm looking at the under in this game. I just think when you look at Tulane's defense, last year, very strong run defense. They gave up just 3.5 yards per carry. And yes, there's a coaching change. John Summerall's in, but this is a team that still returns 7 of its defensive starters. And we know Summerall's a defensive mastermind. His defenses at Troy, really, really solid. I think the Tulane defense steps it up here. A couple of years ago, Tulane was one of the worst defensive programs in college football. They've made really big strides, but I think Kansas State also going to compete defensively in this game. I like the under.
For me, I'm going to roll with Tulane in this one. I just think that, the Green Wave, I think they have a really good shot to be that representative as the group of 5 score in the playoff. I really like the quarterback situation. And generally, when you don't have, when you have a quarterback controversy, which I do believe they have at Tulane, usually that means you don't have a quarterback. But I think that's the opposite here. I think Thompson, the former 5-star recruit from Oregon, the transfer, I expected him to be the starter. And then they went with Mensa. I think a lot of people were surprised by that as well. It wasn't like a big announcement or anything like weeks or months in advance or anything. They kind of just did it out on the field. And I think both might still see playing time. I think Avery Johnson certainly, is everything that he's billed to be. And I think with Colin Klein moving on and moving in an offensive coordinator that lets him throw the ball downfield a little bit more, probably helps him too. But like Ron said, I really like these returning starters on the Tulane defense. And I think that Tulane has enough on both sides of the ball, possible outright win.
Everybody knows I've been yelling Avery Johnson for Heisman all offseason long, man. That's my guy right there. And I like Kansas State here in this game this week. I think they go ahead and beat up on Tulane. Tulane, they're one of my teams in hoops and in football. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't be surprised if what Mitch said came true, if they were the Power 5 team that got into the college football playoff this season. The problem with that, though, is I got K-State as a playoff team and a team with the buys. I think they're going to win the Big 12. I'm really high on this K-State team. Last week, they didn't cover the point spread against UT Martin. They had a kind of a slow first half, but it was the first game of the year. Second half, I thought they really got downhill, started to maul UT Martin, and almost had a chance to cover that point spread. They have a two-headed monster with DJ Giddens in that backfield and Dylan Edwards. You may remember Edwards from Colorado last season. Avery Johnson can run the football, throw the football. I think K-State gets down on Tulane, mainly in the second half, wears them down. We see some rushing lanes really open up. I think ultimately they win this game by like 2 touchdowns. Avery Johnson for Heisman. I'm going to lay the points here with K-State.
Next up, we head to South Bend, where the Notre Dame Fighting Irish return home after their triumphant win at College Station, taking on a Northern Illinois team that a lot of people have pegged to go places in the MAC. A lot of times these MAC teams in these early season games don't always look as good as people believe they will be down the stretch. Ron, what are you thinking in this one?
Yeah, I think this is a letdown spot for Notre Dame. Big win at Texas A&M, not an easy place to play, and their defense stepped it up in a big way. But while I still think they win this game and win it comfortably, it's just I can't lay this many points after a big win like that. Northern Illinois, this is a program that's been solid in the quarterback position the last couple of years. Of course, Rocky Lombardi now in the NFL, where he was in the NFL in preseason play. Ethan Hampton's been waiting in the wings the last couple of seasons as the backup. I think he's a solid option there. I think Northern Illinois does enough here to cover the number, getting a ton of points. So give me the points with the Huskies.
I'm going to take the points here with Northern Illinois as well. I think that, one of the top teams in the MAC, and we saw a mid-range MAC team last week give Syracuse all they could handle, covering that 16.5-point spread, losing by just 16, Ohio University did in that one. So I think that, Northern Illinois could probably hold their own in this game. I think Brown is decent in the backfield. And I think Riley Leonard, of course, found a way to make it happen there at College Station, just like we thought he would. But at the same time, he takes a beating in his style of play as well. And I think look for Notre Dame to win convincingly, just not convincingly enough.
I could see that. And I'm probably forced to pick with join you guys. It's probably one of my least favorite games. I was high on Riley Leonard last season, as I was trying to explain to a lot of people. I thought he was a dog. And I think he's a dog here for Notre Dame as well. And to go and win that game in Texas A&M in front of 100,000 or so yelling Mo Bamba at you, I got to give you some credit for that. My gripe on Notre Dame is they have the easiest route to the playoffs than anybody because of their schedule. We'll see if they're able to hunker down and get there ultimately. The hype is real with Notre Dame, and I'm kind of with the guys in this one. They're going to win this game, of course, and they're going to beat up on this team that they're head and shoulders better than, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's not as dominant as some think, with a lot of clock rolling, some running of the football in this football game. I'll grab the points in my back pocket as well.
For our next game, we head out to Utah, where the Utah Utes taking on Baylor in an early season Big 12 matchup. And that is kind of the beauty of this conference realignment that we see in these super mega conferences, is that we get just a lot more conference play. The thing is, in this one, Utah was very impressive with Cam Rising returning to the fold. But I think what a lot of people might have missed on Baylor is that Finn, who transferred in, was really one of the top transfer portal QBs available. And I'll tell you what, I understand it was Tarleton, but he looked very much the part in that game. Dave Aranda is on the hot seat, but my guess is he's the type of coach, boy, if he does get let go, I think he's going to get picked up in some capacity by someone, if not a head coaching job. Definitely as a coordinator. I think he is way underrated. I know Utah is a really tough building, and this is a stiff test for Baylor. But my guess is that Baylor probably can hang with them here. I think Cam Rising, is certainly everything that they hoped that he would be. He looked healthy, and it's, of course, college football is more fun with him in it. But I think Finn's pretty good, too, and I think he's going to surprise some people. I think I'm going to take the 2 touchdowns here with the Baylor Bears.
Mitch, we're in agreement on one. I'm going to take the Baylor Bears plus the points in this one as well. Utah is the second team in the Big 12 for me behind Kansas State. I just broke it down to y'all while I really like Kansas State. Utah, I understand why they're the favorite in the Big 12, though. And at home, at the crib, is really tough spot to go in there and beat them. And I don't think Baylor goes in there and beats them. Baylor was terrible a year ago in the Big 12, but like Mitch said, I thought they hit the portal fairly well. I love the addition of Finn. And I watched a lot of that Baylor game last week. Baylor is tremendously improved from what they were a year ago. Does that mean they're going to come here and beat Utah? No, it doesn't. But that means I have 14 points in my back pocket because they were so terrible last year. I think they do enough to keep this game fairly competitive. I'm going to grab the points with you in my back pocket.
I'm going to agree with you guys. I like Baylor plus the points. I think it's never easy going into Utah and covering, let alone winning. But I think there's two key factors. One, I mean, Aranda has disappointed so far at Baylor, but he's been a solid coach on the road in a lot of these games. I mean, last year Baylor only won 3 games. 2 of those 3 were conference road games. So this Baylor team, I don't think they'll be too intimidated. Another thing is Mitch mentioned Finn being a solid quarterback. He's got the talent, but he also has the experience. This is a quarterback that's been in college football since 2019 at the FBS level. So we talk about Rising being one of the more senior quarterbacks in college football. Finn's right up there as well. I think Baylor does enough here to cover the spread, maybe pull off the outright upset.
All right, we head to Iowa where the Cy-Hawk Trophy will be given away to the winner of this one as Iowa hosts Iowa State. 3 of the last 5 years this game's been at Iowa State. 3 of the last 4 have been at Iowa State. Returns to Iowa for this one, and we've got a fairly low total, but is it low enough? What do you guys think?
It might be, but it might not be. I don't know. The thing is, I'm higher on this Iowa offense than I have been in years past. I think they actually got a little something on that side of the ball, and that hasn't been the case for them. Defensively, I still think they're around the same team that we've come to expect them to be. I think Iowa's slightly underrated this season. I know they're in the rankings at 25 currently. I expect them to win this game at home. I do. I know the history isn't behind me here in this, but I'm going to lean towards Iowa. I think their offense is much improved. I like how their quarterback looked last week. I'm expecting him to have a nice season. And in all honesty, I know everybody's probably rushing to the under, and that has been the case for this style series. But I think I'm going to go contrarian and go over in this football game. Am I crazy?
You might be. You might be crazy, Jay, because since 2005, there's only 2 of these games in this series that have gone over the number. So if I was forced to take a side on the total, I would be the under. But I'm looking at Iowa State plus the points. And also, in this rivalry, the home team has not fared too well recently. The home team has lost 4 straight games outright, 5 of the last 6, and 9 of the last 11 as well. I think in a lower scoring, ugly series like this has been, 2.5 points means a lot more. So I'm going to take the points with the Cyclones.
Last year, Iowa was a team that rarely scored over 20 points in a game, and they still made it all the way to the Big Ten championship game, which, of course, they scored 0 points. And then in their bowl game, they also scored 0. So, it wasn't quite the same thing. But, new offensive coordinator, they don't have to really score that many points. Think about it. I mean, 12 points, 15 points, 10 points, 10 points. You look at their scores last year, and they still made it to the Big Ten championship game. With all that being said, though, Iowa State, who really has struggled to run the football last year, and we'll have to see how it turns out for them this year, not overly impressive win over North Dakota in their opener, I still think that they can do enough. And I think that, getting that 2.5 points in a game like this, 2.5 is like getting 2 touchdowns in other games, because I do believe it's going to be very low scoring. I'm going to take the points with Iowa State. I think if it goes to overtime, which is certainly a possibility here, like a 10-10 game that goes to overtime, 2.5 is going to come in real handy. All right. We head to Auburn, where the Auburn Tigers take on Cal. It's an interesting one here. You got SEC versus ACC. We've had a lot of these matchups over the first week, and heading into the second week, we've got a bunch here as well. Man, Cal entering the ACC, what a tough schedule these guys have. Not necessarily the games that they're playing. I'm just talking about the logistics. These guys are going to be putting on the frequent flyer miles this season. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I wasn't really impressed with Cal's performance in week 1. The final score looked solid, 31-13, but the offense had less than 300 yards against an FCS opponent that didn't run the ball too well, and I worry about them in this spot against a veteran quarterback like Peyton Thorne and an Auburn team that I think is much improved this season. This is a tough place to play. Like Mitch mentioned, the travel's going to be crazy for Cal this year, and I don't like this spot for him. I'm going to lay the points here with the Auburn Tigers.
I don't love Cal either this year, but, the thing is that they're really not that horrible of a team. Now, this is one of those spots where, Auburn is a tough building. And like I said, Cal has this schedule where they go to Auburn, they're home, they're away. It's like they host Miami, then they go all the way across the country again. And it's like just this whole back and forth thing. I really am not a Thorne fan. I did not like him at Michigan State. I don't like him at Auburn. I mean, even last week against Alabama A&M, he threw for 322 yards and 4 touchdowns, but he was only 13 of 21, which means that he had some playmakers on the other side of things. I tell you, it's going to be a lean to Auburn in this one, laying the points, but not a game that I love.
I'm with you, Mitch. This is a game that's for sure not making my card on Saturday, but for lean purposes, I would roll with the home team, War Eagle, or the Tigers, or whatever their mascot is. But in all honesty, though, Cal, this is a step up in competition for them. New conference this season. They've already hit the nail on the head with the travel spot. If Auburn's going to be, the team that a lot of people think they are and take that next step this season, they need to take care of the winnable spots, and they need to do it in a pretty decent fashion. So I expect, Auburn to come out here guns blazing, and they probably take care of business here, win this game by 14, 17 points or so.
For our next game, we head to the SEC where Kentucky takes on South Carolina. College hoops, anyone? But the thing is, in Kentucky, they love their college hoops. But really, the first half of the season for the Wildcats has been very good to them under Stoops. It's been the second half of the season where this team has fallen off. Of course, both these teams lost a ton, with Spencer Rattler leaving, for the NFL from Carolina. But the thing is, it was Kentucky that really did a nice job in the transfer portal. We saw South Carolina beat Old Dominion last week, but they were a gigantic favorite. Didn't come close to covering the spread in that one, while Kentucky against Southern Miss absolutely dominated from gavel to gavel. Vandegrift, the Georgia transfer at QB for Kentucky, just one of many transfers on this roster. I think Kentucky's just got too much here and at home and at a time of year where they generally do well. I really like Kentucky in this game.
I think this is going to be a fun game to sit back and watch. Me personally, I'm not too invested in this football game. I do think Kentucky's the better football team. But am I really ready to lay 2 possessions with Kentucky? I don't know, and I don't think so. South Carolina did not look great last week. We can call a spade there. But in all honesty, I still think that's where I want to be. I want the points in my back pocket with South Carolina.
Yeah, you can keep the points. I'm rolling with Kentucky here. I want to start by saying you never want to overreact to one performance in any sport, but especially week 1 of college football. But having said that, South Carolina's week 1 performance was really concerning for me because they were really given a gift in that game by Old Dominion turning the ball over 4 times, 2 picks and 2 fumbles, and they still only won the game by 4 points. They still only put up 23 points of offense, 288 total yards. The passing game was not great. The running game was not great. Now you go into Kentucky to face a much tougher opponent in a tough environment. I think Kentucky wins this game in blowout fashion. I'm going to lay the points with the Wildcats.
Got a Big Ten matchup up next. It is Maryland hosting Michigan State. Maryland traditionally decent at home. Michigan State still trying to find their footing as a program. Jay, what do you think?
I think for the time being, I want to continue to fade Michigan State. They were the meme of last week. Everybody saw on Twitter, their quarterback came out and said, hey, if you're a betting man, take the over. His first play from scrimmage was an INT, a pick. And if you were wondering, the game fell underneath the total. Look, Michigan State, I'm not high on this team. I think they're a fade. Like Mitch said, I think the Terps at home at the crib, they're typically a pretty good team, typically a pretty good bet. I'm going to fade Michigan State. I think they're overrated, overvalued. I'm going to take the Terps at home at the crib.
Yeah, I mentioned that in the last game. You never want to overreact to one performance. And I think that's the case in this one. We saw Maryland absolutely blow out UConn, but that's a Huskies team with a lot of question marks. Now you look at Michigan State in their first game against FAU. It was a primetime game, an FAU team that looks improved. It was an ugly final score, that's for sure. But Michigan State's defense looked really strong in that game. 7 sacks. Their run defense was excellent. I think the defense steps up in this game. I still don't love the Spartans' offense, but I think the defense does enough on the road to cover the number in an ugly, low-scoring Big Ten game. Give me the points with the Spartans.
You know that last year Maryland was a bowl team, but in there and a bowl winner against Auburn. But the thing is that in their Big Ten games, while they did have a few wins in there, they got blown out a lot, including at home, 51-15 to Penn State, and losing at home to Illinois as well. They certainly are susceptible, but Michigan State, to me, I'm going to say the same thing that I said last week. Prove it first, because I've seen nothing from this program in years that makes me believe that I want to put one penny of my hard-earned money on them. I think I'm going to roll with the Terps. And, even though, there was some question marks at quarterback and replacing, and all that other stuff that goes on, I think they responded to the challenge. I think they do again. Don't love that hook on there, but it's probably there for a reason. I'm going to take the Terps. For our next game, we head to Tuscaloosa, where the Alabama Crimson Tide, off a pretty nice performance in DeBoer's opener there with the Tide, win over Western Kentucky, while South Florida taking care of business against a very scrappy Bethune-Cookman club. I think that after last year's game between these two teams, I don't think the Tide are going to be taking the Bulls all that lightly. Ron?
Yeah, this is a tough one for me because it's kind of like a revenge game. Even though Alabama won last year, it was a lot closer than it should have been. And I think Alabama still has a lot to prove, especially with the new coach. But also, USF, I think their offense looks strong on paper. I think it looks like one of the best offenses they've had in a while. I just don't think it's going to be enough in this one. I'll lay the points with Alabama. I just don't see a ton of value laying this many points with the team that's coming off a 63-0 win from a week ago. So I'll lean towards the Crimson Tide.
I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to go with South Florida in this one. It's a reach. I understand that. And I think, there's going to be a lot of action here in Alabama. I think we're actually going to be able to get a better number than this with South Florida, because there's they're mad factor. But the whole thing is that they might be as mad as they want to be. But there are certain teams that just end up stacking up pretty well against other teams and other players. And we saw Milroe really struggle against South Florida last year. I think the Bulls have just a surprising amount of speed on that team. And, of course, competing to be the second best team in Florida with UCF behind Miami, with Florida State and Florida really struggling out there. I'm going to look for the Bulls to rise to the occasion here and at least cover the number.
Alabama for me. I love saying that, too. It's probably one of my favorite college football sayings. But, look, I was critical of Milroe in Alabama last season. I think he's going to grow up this season, though. He's kind of one of the quarterbacks I really have my eye on to see if he's going to take that next step. Last week, I thought he took the necessary steps to take that next step. They beat the crap out of Western Kentucky. And I might have to subscribe to their mad angle in this one, because that game last year was way closer than it should have been, 3-3 at half. I think Alabama comes out here today and just takes them behind the woodshed. So I don't want to be fading Alabama too many times, especially this season. So give me the Crimson Tide. I'll lay the points with them here in this one.
Next up, we head to Champaign, where Illinois, the Fighting Illini, taking on the Kansas Jayhawks. Of course, rock, chalk, Jayhawk. But the thing is that Kansas, really a team with expectations this season, up against an Illinois team with pretty modest expectations. Illinois got pummeled in the spring transfer portal. And of course, that meltdown loss against Northwestern last year, that was just one of those that leaves a mark. And of course, that game also is what cost Illinois a shot at a bowl game as well. I think Illinois, probably a little bit disregarded and disrespected this season, but really, understand they played Eastern Illinois in the opener, but they looked pretty efficient in that game. And I think that's one of the things that we have been missing from these Illinois, even the reasonable teams a few years ago, is just that efficiency. And I think, when you have those high completion percentages, good things are going to happen. And I think, with Brett Bielema there, certainly, that he's been a hit and miss coach throughout his career. I think Illinois might be a better team than people think. I'll take the points as a home dog in this one.
I think that's where I want to be in this game with you, Mitch, with the points in my back pocket with the home team. I like this Kansas team. Jaden Daniels is, he's electric, to say the least. Kansas, though, are we really ready to say this program and we're ready to lay points with this program on the road? In the back of my mind, they're still the basketball school. They're much improved. They are a good team, and we saw that last year. But can they overcome that stigma now this season of having expectations? Are they overrated? Are they overvalued? And is Illinois underrated and undervalued, kind of like Mitch was saying? I think that's the case. I think this game's going to be closer than many people think. Kansas probably wins it, but it's probably by like 4. at max. So I think the line's kind of dictating where I'm at here in this one. I'm going to grab the points with the home dog in Illinois.
I'm going to agree with you. I think when you look at Kansas on the road last year, didn't really do too much. I mean, they barely beat a bad Nevada team. They got crushed at Texas. They lost against Oklahoma State. They took their wins against Cincinnati and Iowa State, two of the weaker teams in the Big 12. But I wouldn't want to be laying points with this team on the road. I don't necessarily trust their defense quite yet. Devin Neal's one of the best running backs in college football. Daniel's a good quarterback, but Illinois, I think, has made some improvements offensively themselves. I think Illinois covers the number at least. I think they have a chance at winning this game.
For our next game, we head to a ACC-SEC battle once again, but this one on a neutral site in Charlotte as the NC State Wolfpack taking on Tennessee. Two teams that were pretty decent a year ago, two teams that have, certainly reasonable expectations this year, and two teams where the quarterbacks really are the big story. Jay?
The quarterbacks are the big story for these two teams. Defense for NC State is kind of what you would think about when you think of this team, but they kind of let me down last week to Western Carolina. I thought Western Carolina moved the football very effectively in that first half. NC State did settle in the second half, but watching Western Carolina move that football like that, I think Tennessee definitely will be able to move that football a bit here in this game. And I think I think the quarterback, Mr. McCall for NC State, and his offense will do enough here as well. I like the over in this game. I do. I like the over in this game. I think we'll get some points. I think we see the ball kind of go up and down the field. Give me an over between these two teams here in this one.
Yeah, this is a game where I do think there's overreaction to week one. NC State, it wasn't the best performance on paper against Western Carolina, but that's a Western Carolina team that had one of the best offenses in FCS level last year. So I'm not really too worried about the NC State defense. And on the offensive side, NC State got going late in that one. And McCall, he had a lot of opportunities, but he missed a lot of open receivers in some big bomb plays that could have happened. I'm not worried about him either. He's been a great quarterback at the FBS level the last couple of years. Tennessee looked awesome against Chattanooga, but this is not Chattanooga. It's a neutral site game, and I think there's way too many points to be laying. I'm going to take the points with NC State.
I think when we look at this game in particular, I think we have to look at the point spread because I do believe that Tennessee is the more talented team, and I do believe Imaleva, or however you pronounce it, is the better quarterback of these two. Grayson McCall, of course, Coastal Carolina, he had a good run there, but certainly not against this type of talent that he's going to be seeing on the other side of the ball. I think it is going to be a hard-fought game. I don't really trust NC State all that much to get the outright win, but I think they might have a shot at the cover. I'm going to lean at this point to NC State. It's a pick that could change over the course of the week, though. Next, we head to Lincoln, Nebraska. A lot of excitement around this year's Husker team with a freshman quarterback that everybody wanted. Of course, Nebraska with the longest home sellout streak of consecutive sold-out games. And that, of course, will continue this week at Lincoln as the Colorado Buffalo come in, a traditional rival of the Huskers. Jay, what's up?
Hey, everybody knows me here at Pick Dogs as, I guess the front runner for the Colorado team. I like this Colorado team. I really like their quarterback. I love Travis Hunter. Jimmy Horn had an amazing game last week. We saw Colorado get Nebraska last season. I think Nebraska, I'm here to tell you right now today, is the better football team. This line has now moved up to Nebraska laying 7.5, though. I took Colorado last season against Nebraska. I didn't like Nebraska's quarterback, Mr. Sims, now back up at Arizona State. That was one of the main key reasons why I wanted to fade Nebraska last season in this game. I didn't like Nebraska's offense. I didn't think they were able to really move the football, and we saw that be the case in that game. Well, this year, it's not the case, man. Nebraska got Patrick Mahomes' little cousin, a.k.a., or that's what we've been calling him on Twitter. He got some game to him. He got some game. Look, I'm still taking hashtag we coming, though. I think that hook looms large in this football game. If Colorado's offense is able to move the football like I think they will be able to, I think they're going to be fine. Defensively, they leave a lot to be desired. I definitely understand that. We saw, an FCS team last week move the football fairly effectively on them. But I think offensive, they're going to do enough to keep this game competitive. I'm going to take the over. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, and I think Colorado does cover the point spread.
To me, this is a perfect spot for Nebraska, not only situationally where you're playing at home in a revenge spot. You were embarrassed against Colorado last year in a big time, it wasn't a primetime game, but it was a lot of people were watching that one. And now you get them at home here. You get your quarterback in Raiola, who is young and inexperienced. We're going to probably see those rookie mistakes in these true road games in conference play at Purdue, at Ohio State, but at home against a beatable Colorado defense. I still think Raiola, really talented QB. We saw him in that first week against UTEP. Nebraska was dominant on both sides of the ball in that game. They have a lot to prove and a lot of revenge to get after in this one. I think it's a blowout win for the Cornhuskers. I'm going to lay the points. I think this should be a double-digit line. But because Colorado is the new public darlings, we're getting a really good price.
Real bad matchup here for Colorado. Nebraska's strength of their team is their defensive line with 3 NFL draft prospects. They're playing that 3-3-5 defense that they play. It's just weird, right? Nobody else plays it. And, I just think that Nebraska, with those 3 guys up front, going to be able to get the pressure. I don't like the way Shedeur Sanders drops back in the pocket. I especially don't like the way he reacts to pressure as he takes 3 and 4 yard losses and turns them into 10, 12 yard losses. I tell you, we keep this list around for a reason, and there we see it as number 4 on the do not bet list. That is Shedeur Sanders for Heisman. Hashtag we coming. I'm taking the Huskers in this one, and I think it's, like Ron said, I think it's big.
I always hating on my Colorado Buffs, but I get it. It should be a fun game for us this weekend. It should be a fun one.
Next up, we head to Norman, Oklahoma, where Coach Will Venables and the Sooners take on the Houston Cougars. Oklahoma, of course, formerly a member of the Big 12, now in the SEC. Houston, second year in the Big 12, coming off of that loss to UNLV. Oklahoma looked pretty impressive against Temple in their opener. What do you guys think?
Oklahoma did look impressive last week. I got to give them some credit. I thought they kind of would look impressive. Moving to the SEC, everybody, thinks that's the best conference on the planet, and it is, but they're still slightly overrated, overvalued, in my opinion, as a conference as a whole. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about Oklahoma. And I thought Oklahoma in their first week wanted to make a statement to everybody. Hey, we're coming here to compete. We're not just going to be the doormat of this conference. And I think that's kind of going to be their attitude all season long. In the Big 12, they were usually regarded as the second best team or the first best team in the conference every single year. That's not the case for them moving to the SEC. It's just not. But in their hearts, they still believe they're one of the best teams in the country. And I don't think we really see them let their foot off the gas in certain spots, especially not a spot like this. Houston has had a high-powered offenses in years past, but I think Oklahoma's defense, especially with a defensive head coach, I think they locked down Houston in this one. And offensively, I think they do enough to get us up and over this number. I'm going to lay the points here with Oklahoma. Mitch, how you feeling?
I think this could be one of those spots where we could take advantage of Houston's bad look in week 1 against UNLV and maybe take advantage of Oklahoma's really good look against Temple in that to maybe find some value here on the Cougars. I really don't love laying close to 30 points in a college football game, especially one where the team is coming off such of a blowout win and the other team is coming off really what was an upset loss. I just think Houston might be a little bit better than the team we saw against UNLV, and Oklahoma, I'm not 100% ever convinced with these guys. I'll take the points with Houston.
Yeah, I'm going to take the points too. I'm going to take the under. Oklahoma, they were 1 of 12 on third down in that game against Temple. So, they put up a lot of points and they covered the spread, but it was really because they forced, 6 turnovers, 4 fumbles, 2 interceptions. You're not going to get that against teams like Houston. I still think Houston's one of the weaker teams in Power 5 football, but I think we see a much better performance here from the Cougars, and especially their defense wasn't too bad in that game against UNLV, especially their secondary. So I think we go under the number and we go with the Houston Cougars plus the points.
Next up, we head to Alton Stadium in Oregon, where the Ducks take on Boise State. Of course, Boise, a traditional power now these days. In Oregon, expectations through the roof for Dan Lanning's team. But last week, with Dylan Gabriel at the helm, the leading Heisman candidate, they looked anything but spectacular against Idaho, who held them down pretty well. It was 24-14 when all was said and done, but the game was much closer. It was 14-14 midway through the fourth quarter. Of course, the Ducks should be a better team than this, and we know Lanning has a world of talent to work with. Meanwhile, Boise, Ashton Genty last week, 6 touchdowns against Georgia Southern, including that 77-yarder to get things started. The problem with it is that Boise gave up 45 points in that game. I think that with Lanning's defensive schemes, I think he puts the clamps on Genty in this game and makes somebody else on Boise try and beat him. And I think for the Ducks, retribution as far as the performance goes. We saw Florida State on Monday night with DJU trying to make amends for his performance in the opener. Wasn't able to do it. I think Dylan Gabriel might have more success than that. 18.5 is a ton of points, but Alton Stadium, just a tough building. I'm going to go with the Ducks in this one.
Yeah, for me, Mitch, the problem was I didn't think Gabriel was all that bad last week when you look at his stat line. 41 for 49, 380 yards, 2 touchdowns, and it still wasn't enough for them to blow the doors off of Idaho. I think if Boise State can come in here and run the football kind of how they did last week, now, of course, this is a much better opponent, and we've seen teams go into Outson and die. My most famous loss last year was a team that went into Outson and died. So it's not fun fading Oregon in Outson, but I think it's where I got to be, man. I think Boise State will be able to do enough to keep this game within the point spread. I'm a little worried about their defense. Oregon probably will open it up on them. But if they're able to play ball control football, we're getting damn near 3 touchdowns in our back pocket. Come on, Boise. Let's do enough to get a cover, baby. Let's see if they can do it.
Boise really relied on that ground game last week, but 10.6 yards per carry on the ground. But Oregon's run defense has been excellent. I mean, last year, one of the best run defenses in college football. It was good against Idaho, and I think it's going to be strong here. I think we see a bounce-back performance from Oregon. It was an ugly win against an FCS opponent. But this week, I think that their offense sharpens up. I think the defense is as strong as ever. I don't think Boise State has the answers. And that giving up 45 points to Georgia Southern is pretty concerning for me. I'm going to go with the Ducks here and lay the points.
For our next game, we head to Washington State for a independent Washington State team taking on Texas Tech. Texas Tech did not look good in their opener, man. They're giving up 51 points against Abilene Christian. Meanwhile, Washington State, very impressive in their opener, but against light competition as well. What are you guys thinking?
It's a tough game. This is a tough game, in my opinion. I'm higher on Texas Tech than many might be, but after last week, I don't know if I will continue that train. It's week 2, and Ron has kind of hit the nail on the head the entire show. I don't want to overreact here in this week. I think we're going to learn a lot this week. And we're going to learn a lot about these two teams. Wazoo, I thought they were going to take a step back after losing Cam Ward, who's now down in Miami. We know what he did last week. But these boys still look good, man. Their quarterback, they didn't ask him to do a ton. He still put up 5 touchdowns. Just line reading. Hey, Wazoo, they're not a 3-point favorite in this game. They're only 2. Everybody usually says they usually give the home team 3. It's a tough one. I'm expecting Texas Tech to be better than they were last week. I think last week was an anomaly. No surprise here. I'm going to roll with another Texas team.
Yeah, this one might be my least favorite game on the board betting-wise. It's just, I don't know what to expect from Texas Tech after that really bad performance against Abilene. And I'm honestly leaning towards the over because I just don't trust either defense. I mean, Abilene Christian put up 615 yards, 30 first downs. They had their way in the passing game. And on the other side, I mean, Washington State, their offense looks super strong, but they also gave up 21 first downs to an FCS opponent, 450 yards, and 4.5 yards per carry on the ground. I lean towards the over. It's a steep total, but I think it's for good reason.
Washington State has a real chance to shake things up this season. I mean, not being in a conference, kind of playing that Mountain West schedule with some other mixed-in games, I think they got a chance to actually move the needle here. And I think the game like this against Texas Tech is going to be one of those wins against a major conference team that they're going to have on their resume. Did not like the way Texas Tech looked. Usually, a team like that's, they'll bounce back, or we'll see like what Florida State did against Boston College in their second game. I think Washington State, a tougher building than people give it credit for. I'll take Washington State at home. Next up, we head to Arizona State, where Arizona State Sun Devils take on Mississippi State. Arizona State, it was a surprise that they won the game at all, but the fact that they won it, how they won it, wow, pretty impressive, especially on the defensive side of the ball. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I took Wyoming last week plus the points. I thought the Cowboys were a very live dog. Arizona State superior on both sides of the ball. It wasn't even close. I mean, the offense was outstanding. The defense even better. 118 yards given up and only 1.3 yards per carry to a Wyoming team. It's been having a good ground game the last couple of years. So I don't want to overreact to one performance, but I still think Arizona State is the better team in this matchup. I think Mississippi State is going to be a down year for them. I think they're one of the weaker teams in the SEC. I like the Arizona State Sun Devils laying the points.
Mississippi State's defensive numbers, even against Eastern Kentucky, just really not overly impressive. Eastern Kentucky, of course, didn't put up big numbers on them or anything like that. I mean, they lost 56-7, but they did manage to put up a balanced attack against them. I think with Arizona State, we have to remember that the defense was super opportunistic early in that game. I think they might be opportunistic again in this one. I think Arizona State, a win like that, maybe they start to believe in themselves. It's not surprising that a big-time university with great locations, which just looks like a very fun place to go to school, would have a good football team. I'll roll with the Sun Devils in this one.
Let's go 3 for 3, fellas. Let's go 3 for 3. I'm going to take the Sun Devils with you guys. Fading the SEC, it's early, but it's been kind of profitable. And I think that's going to be the case here in this one as well. Mississippi State, shout out to them. They handled business. They did what they were supposed to do at home, at the crib, against a weaker opponent. But now here on the road, going up against an Arizona State team that's underrated. These are like teams I like betting on, is these Arizona State style teams. And I think we'll be able to get this one across the board too. We're laying under a touchdown, so it's a perfect situation for me. Give me Arizona State. I'll lay the points.
Next up, we head to the LA Coliseum, where the USC Trojans return home from Vegas and their triumphant win over LSU, hosting Utah State, who was big winners in week one as well, taking on a feisty Robert Morris team. I just think in this particular matchup that, the Trojans, big expectations with that really public win up against a Utah State team, which not all that terrible. And, of course, a quarterback that is played at a big-time program in Petras, who played at Iowa 31 starts. Of course, we already talked about Iowa on this show earlier and how bad their offense has been for so long. So I think, at Utah State, probably the expectations can't be too high of the offense. But I do think that with the way that USC's win was just so public and so front and center and just really so convincing with the performance at quarterback, I think the value here has got to be on Utah State.
Hey, I was critical of Lincoln Riley in week one. I wanted to take LSU. I ultimately left the game alone, but I thought USC surprised me a bit and how they looked against LSU. I'm kind of with Mitch, though. I think it just leaves him overrated, overvalued. Lincoln Riley, he's never one to. I guess he kind of is, but I don't think they're going to just come out here and blow the doors off of Utah State is all I'm saying. Their quarterback, hats off to him. He looked good last week. He looked good. But can they continue to replicate it? This is a team that had the number 1 overall pick last season, and they were really, really, really disappointing last season. So am I ready to just buy in on this USC hype? A team who I know they're an historic program, but they haven't really done much in recent memory since I was a kid. So I think fading them is probably the right place to be.
For me, I'm looking at this game just a situational aspect. I just can't lay this many points with the team off a huge win like that. I think it's a clear letdown spot. I think USC looked great. I mean, there's no kidding that. I mean, it was a big win over a big opponent, and Utah State, not really the best performance against Robert Morris. Their defense especially gave up 360 yards, but this is way too many points after a huge win like that. I think USC wins the game, wins it comfortably, but Utah State covers the number.
That wraps up week 2's college football picks for the Pick Dogs crew. Next week, we've got a loaded schedule for you featuring Wisconsin, Alabama. We've got Florida trying to bounce back against Texas A&M, who tries to bounce back. And we've got some other interesting contests, like that Missouri-Boston College game got a whole lot more interesting as well. Of course, we'll be back covering all the games and all the action with you. Jay, Ron, thanks again for being with us. And as always, let's get on some winners.